In the small house tucked beneath the dim glow of a streetlight, a fierce storm swept through, carrying thunderous roars and icy winds sharp as blades. In the cramped kitchen, where warm meals were once laid out on an old wooden table, the air turned suffocatingly heavy. The stillness was shattered by a man's booming voice. "Tiana, do you think I'm blind and wouldn't see this disgrace?" Tiana, a young girl with long black hair and eyes that once sparkled with dreams, now stood trembling in fear. Her small hands clenched the hem of her shirt as her father's words struck her like knives, cutting deep into her fragile heart. I didn't mean to." Her voice quavered, a plea for understanding, met only by the sound of his hand slamming against the table. "Didn't mean to. You're only 14 and you've already done this. How could I ever show my face again?" Her mother, standing with crossed arms in the corner of the kitchen, showed no sympathy. She simply shook her head, her eyes colder than the storm outside. "Get out of this house, Tiana. You're no longer my child." Tiana fell to her knees, tears mingling with the rain outside. In that moment, she realized she had nowhere to go. The house that once felt like a warm nest was now nothing more than a prison of pain. Outside the house, the murmurs of neighbors pierced through her exhausted heart like relentless taps on a fragile shell. They gathered under awnings, casting judgmental glances at the girl being cast out. That girl, bringing shame to the whole neighborhood. How could parents like that raise such a child? Tiana stepped out, the rain pelting her face with icy indifference. Wearing only a thin shirt and tattered shoes soaking through, she stumbled along the cold cobblestone path. "Did you see her? That girl, such a disgrace!" A neighbor called out loudly, their voice tinged with mockery. No one stopped her. No hand reached out to save her. Tiana wandered aimlessly in the rain, each step sinking deeper into despair. Yet amidst the darkness and faint glimmers of light, a fragile spark of hope flickered, not from a lamp, but from a sliver of faith still lingering in her heart. "I have to live. For my child." The night closed in around her, leaving only the sound of rain drumming on rooftops and her faint footsteps. Her tattered shoes could not keep the cold from seeping into her skin. Her mind swirled with unanswered questions. What did I do wrong? Why would my parents push me away like this? Where will I go now? The storm seemed to challenge her resolve, its chill cutting to the bone. Yet Tiana's heart continued to beat fiercely, as if reminding her to persevere, not just for herself, but for the tiny life growing inside her. She passed a narrow alley, the dim light of a window flickering through the rain. Hesitantly, she knocked on the door of an abandoned-looking house, hoping for a moment's shelter. "I don't need much. Just a dry place for the night." The door creaked open, revealing a middle-aged man with a cold, unforgiving stare. "Go somewhere else. This isn't a place for people like you. Please, just one night." The door slammed shut in her face, leaving Tiana clutching the frame, her tears mixing with the freezing rain. She kept walking, her weary steps leading her to a small park. The soaked benches under the storm appeared to be her only refuge. As she sat down, a group of young men emerged from the shadows. "Hey there, little girl! What are you doing out here all alone?" One of them sneered, a mischievous grin spreading across his face. Tiana recoiled, standing up to leave, but they blocked her path. "Don't leave so soon. Stay and chat with us for a while." Terror gripped her. With all the strength she could muster, Tiana ran, her bare feet splashing through icy puddles. She dared not look back as their laughter echoed behind her, growing louder and closer. Finally, she turned into a narrow, pitch-black alley. Her heart pounded against her ribs, breaths coming in ragged gasps. The sound of their footsteps faded, leaving her alone in the suffocating darkness. Pressing her back against the cold wall, tears streamed down her face. Why does everyone hate me?" Dragging herself out of the alley, her legs trembling under her weight, Tiana found refuge beneath a large tree in the park. Curling up beneath its branches to avoid prying eyes, she felt the rain seep through her clothes, chilling her to the core. "My child, I'm so sorry," she whispered, wrapping her arms around her belly as if shielding the unborn baby from the harshness of the world. Exhausted and drained, her eyelids grew heavy. The rain continued to fall, and the world around her blurred into emptiness. When all hope seemed lost, a gentle voice pierced through the storm. "Child, why are you lying here in the rain?" A warm, aged hand rested lightly on her shoulder. Tiana opened her eyes to see an elderly woman with a kind face, holding an old, weathered umbrella. Who are you?" Tiana stammered, her voice weak. "I'm Martha, the baker from the corner shop. Don't be afraid. You shouldn't be out here. Come with me, and I'll help you." Martha gently lifted Tiana and led her to a small bakery. In its cozy interior, lit by soft yellow lights, Tiana felt warmth for the first time in hours of wandering through the storm. "Sit here while I make you some tea," Martha said, her eyes full of concern. For the first time, Tiana felt a flicker of solace in her heart. Yet the pain lingered, like a wound too deep to heal. Inside the small bakery, the warm atmosphere seemed to melt away the bitter chill Tiana had endured. The gentle aroma of freshly baked bread filled the air, blending with the soft yellow glow of the lights, creating an extraordinary sense of peace. Tiana sat on an old wooden chair, clutching a cup of hot tea Martha had just brewed. Silent tears streamed down her face as countless emotions swirled within her heart. Martha sat across from her, her gaze gentle yet filled with concern. "You don't have to say anything if you don't want to. But I can see you need a safe place to rest." Tiana lowered her head, her voice breaking into fragmented words. I don't deserve help. I've disappointed my parents, ruined everything. I'm just useless." Martha tilted her head slightly, her aged yet steady hands gently resting on Tiana's. "No one is useless, dear. I don't know what you've been through, but no one deserves to be treated this way. You are human, and you are worthy of life." Martha's words were like a ray of light piercing through the darkness in Tiana's heart. Yet, instead of feeling relieved, Tiana broke down into uncontrollable sobs, as if all the emotions she had suppressed for so long were finally escaping. The next morning, Tiana woke up on the old sofa tucked into the corner of the bakery. Martha had prepared a simple breakfast of bread and warm milk for her. "Stay here today," Martha said warmly. "If you're feeling better, I'll show you a few small tasks to help around. Consider this place your home." Those words felt both comforting and unfamiliar to Tiana. She had grown accustomed to cold stares and harsh criticism, rather than care and compassion. Nevertheless, she decided to trust, if only for once. As Tiana began helping Martha tidy up the bakery, the bell above the door suddenly chimed. A group of customers walked in, but their curious expressions quickly shifted to suspicious glances when they noticed Tiana. One middle-aged woman leaned toward Martha and whispered, "Martha, what are you thinking? Don't you know who that girl is? She's no good." Martha smiled, but there was a flicker of sternness in her gaze as she replied, "She's my niece, helping me out with some tasks. If that bothers you, perhaps another bakery would suit you better." The woman flushed with embarrassment, mumbled something under her breath, and left the shop. Tiana stood frozen, gripping the cleaning cloth tightly in her hand. She couldn't understand why Martha was willing to endure such discomfort from customers for her sake. "I know what you're thinking," Martha said gently. "Don't let it bother you. Those people aren't living your life, so they have no right to judge." Despite Martha's reassuring words, Tiana couldn't shake off the growing guilt weighing her down. One afternoon, while Martha left the bakery to shop for ingredients, Tiana stayed behind, tidying up the counter. The soft chime of the bell above the door interrupted her thoughts, and 3 men entered. Her breath caught as she recognized one of them, one of the men who had threatened her in the park before. "Well, hello there," the man sneered, a mocking smile stretching across his face. "What a surprise to see you here." Tiana instinctively stepped back, clutching the cleaning cloth tightly in her hand, her heart pounding in fear. "What do you want?" Tiana's voice trembled, but she tried to keep her gaze steady and firm. "Relax," one of the men said with a smirk. "We're just here to say hi, but it's quite interesting to see you working here. This bakery seems pretty generous, doesn't it?" The group burst into laughter, and then, without warning, they began to cause havoc, knocking trays of baked goods to the floor and scattering pastries everywhere. "Stop it! Don't hurt the bakery!" Tiana screamed, her voice pleading. But her cries only fueled their amusement. They laughed louder, continuing their destruction. At that moment, the door swung open, and Martha entered, her eyes blazing with a rare fury. Without hesitation, she charged forward, yelling at the men to leave. Her commanding presence startled them, and they reluctantly retreated, leaving behind a scene of chaos. Tiana stood frozen in the middle of the wrecked bakery, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry. This is all my fault. I shouldn't be here," she said, her voice cracking with emotion. Martha placed a comforting hand on Tiana's shoulder, her expression a mix of sorrow and determination. "No, sweetheart. You've done nothing wrong. Don't let the cruelty of others make you believe you're undeserving." As time passed, Martha's small bakery gradually became a safe haven for Tiana. Each morning, she helped knead dough, arrange baked goods on trays, and clean the counters. These simple tasks gave her a sense of purpose, as if she were slowly rebuilding herself from the shattered pieces of her life. But the outside world was not so forgiving. Neighbors continued to watch her with judgmental eyes, whispering cruel rumors behind her back. Some regular customers of the bakery even boycotted it because of her presence. One afternoon, as Tiana stood behind the counter, a woman stormed in, her voice sharp and accusing. "You there! You took my wallet! The last time I saw it was here!" Panic surged through Tiana. She froze, unable to respond. Before she could say a word, Martha's voice rang out, firm and unyielding. "Without evidence, no one has the right to tarnish my granddaughter's reputation." Martha's unwavering tone silenced the murmurs of the growing crowd. The accuser fumbled through her large handbag and, to everyone's relief, found her wallet buried at the bottom. Though the misunderstanding was resolved, the damage had been done. The incident left a deep scar on Tiana's heart, one that Martha's protective words couldn't easily erase. After the incident, Tiana sat quietly in the corner of the kitchen, her hands clenched tightly, tears streaming down her face. "I've tried my best, but no matter what I do, they still hate me. I can't go on like this," she whispered. Martha came over and placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, her eyes filled with empathy. "I know it's hard," she said gently, "but don't let their cruelty make you forget your worth. Every day you live, every step you take, proves them wrong." Late one evening, as Tiana was finishing up her chores, she noticed Martha sitting at the kitchen table, staring intently at a stack of bills. Her face was pensive, but as Tiana approached, she quickly smiled, trying to mask her concern. "What's wrong, Grandma?" Tiana asked, her eyes searching Martha's face. "Oh, nothing, dear. Just some bills. I'll take care of it," Martha replied, her voice light but her exhaustion evident. Tiana, however, saw through her pretense. That night, unable to sleep, she lay awake reflecting on everything Martha had done for her. She resolved to help in any way she could. The next morning, Tiana scoured the town, searching for work, yet door after door was shut in her face. Finally, at a small coffee shop, the owner dismissed her with a condescending smirk. "We don't hire people like you," he said. "Don't scare off my customers." His words cut like a knife, but Tiana refused to give up. Those words cut deep like a blade, but Tiana didn't give up. Eventually, she managed to secure a small job handing out flyers on the street. Despite being shooed away by many, she persisted. earning only a few coins to help Martha. That evening, she placed the small sum of money on the kitchen table, her eyes filled with determination. "Grandma, this is for you. I want to help you pay the bills." Martha looked at her, her eyes welling up with tears. "Oh, my silly child. You don't have to do this. All I need is for you to live a good life." One stormy night, while Martha and Tiana were sound asleep, a loud crash came from the direction of the bakery. Both jolted awake and ran outside, only to find the front window shattered and baked goods scattered all over the floor. On the wall, bright red spray-painted letters screamed, "Trash like you don't belong here!" Tiana froze, her hands clenched tightly into fists. "This is all my fault! If I weren't here, they wouldn't have done this!" Martha turned to her, her gaze sharp and unwavering. "Listen to me, child. They did this because they fear what is different. But none of this is your fault. Don't let their hatred destroy your courage." With steady hands and an unshakable resolve, Martha cleaned the hateful graffiti off the wall and tidied the wreckage. Her calm determination felt like a warm ember, reigniting hope in Tiana's heart and helping her face the storm of challenges. Despite the damages, Martha's small bakery stood resilient. The next morning, Tiana stood by the counter, her eyes conflicted. She wanted to continue forward, but the lingering fear of hatred and sabotage weighed heavily on her. Martha stepped in, placing a firm yet gentle hand on her shoulder. Her voice was soothing, yet resolute. "My dear, always remember that every loaf of bread we bake isn't just food, it's hope. We won't let them take that away." One afternoon, as Tiana was wiping down the tables, the bell above the bakery door rang. A man in a sharp suit entered, his face stern. It was Mr. Miguel, the owner of a prominent local restaurant. "Mrs. Martha, I heard about the incident last night. Such a shame," he said, his deep voice carrying an air of authority. Martha nodded, her gaze cautious. "Thank you for your concern, but my granddaughter and I are fine." Miguel glanced at Tiana, his eyes a mixture of skepticism and sympathy. "I'm looking for someone to help out in the kitchen, a simple job. If this young lady is interested, I can give her a chance." Tiana was taken aback, her eyes revealing her hesitation. She wasn't sure if this was genuine kindness or another trap set by people looking to bring her down. Martha met her gaze with a reassuring smile. "Sometimes we need to trust that there are still good people in this world. Give it a try, my dear." On her first day at the restaurant, Tiana felt the heavy weight of scrutiny. Every gaze turned toward her, from the bustling chefs to the waitstaff. Some whispered behind her back, while others openly looked at her with disdain. The physically demanding work left her exhausted, but she didn't stop. When a tray of dishes slipped from her hands and shattered on the floor, a chorus of laughter erupted from a few staff members behind her. How embarrassing! Why would they even hire someone like her? Tiana lowered her head, her eyes stinging with tears. Yet, as Miguel passed by, he simply said, "Clean it up and keep going. Mistakes are normal." His calm and steady tone gave Tiana just enough confidence to press on. A week into the job, Tiana realized she was being paid less than the other workers, even though her duties were more grueling. Nervously, she stood outside Miguel's office, debating whether to say something. Gathering her courage, she knocked and stepped inside. "Sir, I wanted to ask why I'm being paid less than everyone else." Miguel looked at her, a hint of surprise crossing his face at her boldness. "You know, people like you usually aren't trusted. I need to see how well you perform before increasing your pay." His words felt like a cold slap across the face, but instead of shrinking back, Tiana straightened her spine, her gaze unwavering. "I'll prove I'm worth it. I don't need charity. I just need fairness." One busy evening, the restaurant was thrown into chaos when a server failed to show up for their shift. Miguel was visibly concerned. The chefs were swamped, and no one was willing to take on extra work. Despite being a kitchen assistant, Tiana stepped forward. "I'll do it. I can help serve the tables," she volunteered. With agility and patience, Tiana handled the demanding crowd with ease, ensuring every customer was satisfied. By the end of the night, Miguel approached her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You exceeded all expectations. I owe you an apology." For the first time, Tiana felt genuine acknowledgement from someone she had thought would only judge her. After her shift, Tiana returned to the bakery, where Martha greeted her with a gentle smile. But the bakery was no longer as bustling as before. The worry in Martha's eyes betrayed the truth. Business was struggling financially. "Grandma, let me help you. I'll work harder, earn more money, and we'll pay the bills together," Tiana said, her voice firm. Martha shook her head softly. "You don't have to bear everything, my dear. All I want is for you to be happy." But Tiana couldn't stand by and watch the one person who had always protected her endure any more hardship. Tiana quickly adapted to her new routine. By day, she worked diligently at Miguel's restaurant. By night, she returned to the bakery to assist Martha. Through her tireless effort, she began to find strength in her purpose and hope in her resilience. She began to understand the value of hard work and felt a sense of pride in earning her own money. But beneath her strong exterior, the emotional scars from her past still lingered. One day, as Tiana was serving at the restaurant, the door swung open. A woman walked in, her figure so familiar that Tiana froze in place. It was Mrs. Celia, her mother. Their eyes met, but instead of rushing toward her daughter, Mrs. Celia stood still, her gaze filled with both regret and hesitation. Tiana turned away, continuing her work, though her heart pounded. A while later, Mrs. Celia rose and slowly approached her. "Tiana!" Her voice cracked. Tiana looked up, her eyes cold and guarded. "What do you want here?" "I'm not here to trouble you. I heard everything. I wanted to apologize for what happened." Instead of soothing her, those words only weighed Tiana down further. Mrs. Celia placed a trembling hand on her daughter's arm, her voice hoarse. "Tiana, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but today, I want to prove I'm sincere. This is everything your grandmother and I could gather to help you keep the bakery." Tiana was speechless. For the first time in years, she saw genuine sincerity in her mother's eyes. Tears streamed down Mrs. Celia's face, but Tiana didn't want to hear more. She walked away, leaving her mother standing silently in the middle of the restaurant. After her shift, Tiana sat motionless in the kitchen, staring into the void. Mr. Miguel approached, setting a glass of water in front of her. "You don't have to tell me, but I'm guessing that woman was your mother." Tiana nodded but said nothing. Miguel sat down beside her, his voice steady and warm. "I've been a father to 3 children, and I've made my share of mistakes. But I've learned that parents aren't perfect. Sometimes they're just people, flawed, with regrets they carry for life." Tiana bit her lip, holding back tears. "But what she did broke my life. How can I forgive her?" Miguel looked at her, his eyes gentle. "It's not easy. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened or excusing someone's actions. It's about letting go of the pain they left behind, so it doesn't control you anymore." His words lingered in her heart, sparking a thought she hadn't dared to consider before. During a final gathering with the neighbors, Tiana stood up and spoke clearly. "In the past, I thought forgiveness was impossible, that people had to pay for the harm they caused. But today, I've realized forgiveness isn't for them. It's to free myself." A week later, Martha received a notice from the landlord, stating that the bakery's rent was overdue and they couldn't wait much longer. Sitting beside her, Tiana's face was etched with worry. "Grandma, I'll work extra shifts at the restaurant. I can't let you lose the bakery." Martha gently shook her head, her voice weak but filled with love. "Sweetheart, this place isn't as important as you are. Don't burden yourself for me. I know you want to help, But don't sacrifice everything for me. This bakery is dear to me, but you are the most important thing in my life." Those words only fueled Tiana's determination. She began picking up extra shifts at the restaurant while selling pastries she and Martha made at local markets on weekends. One late evening, as Tiana was closing the bakery, a group of young men emerged from the shadows. Their mocking laughter echoed in the quiet street. "Well, if it isn't our little tough girl, let's see how long this bakery lasts." Tiana stepped back, clutching a cleaning cloth in her trembling hands. "Please. This is all I have." Her plea fell on deaf ears. The sound of shattering glass rang out as they smashed displays, scattering pastries across the floor. Tiana screamed, but no one came to help. Just then, Martha appeared, wielding a broom, her eyes sharp with fury. "Get out of here before I call the police!" The group hesitated, retreating but not before spray painting red letters on the wall. "Trash like you aren't welcome here." Tiana fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. Martha placed a firm yet loving hand on her shoulder. "We'll clean this up. No one gets to take away our hope." One day, as Tiana returned to the bakery, she found her mother, Mrs. Celia, waiting at the door. She held a small box and approached her daughter hesitantly. "I know you don't want to see me, but please take this." Her voice trembled. Tiana hesitated but eventually accepted the box. Inside was an old bracelet that had once belonged to her grandmother. "This is the only thing I thought you might accept from me. If you're not ready to forgive, I'll wait. But I want you to know I won't give up on you." Those words stirred something in Tiana's heart. She didn't respond, but held onto the bracelet. For the first time, her mother's words felt genuine. As time passed, Tiana grew stronger. From a girl trembling under judgmental stares, she learned to stand tall and walk with confidence. Yet deep down, the scars of her past lingered. The bracelet stayed in its box, a quiet reminder of an unresolved relationship. One morning, as Tiana was preparing to open the bakery, she found Martha slumped over the kitchen table. Panic surged through her as she rushed to her grandmother's side. "Grandma, what's wrong?" Martha tried to smile, but her pale face only deepened Tiana's fear. "I'm just a bit tired. Don't worry." But Tiana couldn't ignore it. She took Martha to the hospital, where the doctor informed them that Martha was suffering from exhaustion due to overwork. The news hit Tiana like a heavy blow to the chest. As Martha was moved to a resting room, Tiana sat by her side, holding her frail hand. "You've done so much for me. Now it's my turn to take care of you." While Martha remained in the hospital, Tiana had to manage the bakery alone. However, the customer turnout had dwindled significantly as lingering rumors continued to harm their reputation. The mounting rent and hospital bills weighed heavily on her shoulders. One day, the landlord visited and delivered a blunt ultimatum. "If you can't pay the rent by the end of the month, I'll have to reclaim this bakery." Tiana sat quietly in the kitchen, a wave of helplessness washing over her. Then she remembered Martha's words, "Hope lies in the cakes we make." With those words echoing in her mind, she decided to organize a bake sale event. She crafted innovative pastry creations to entice customers and bring them back to the bakery. During the bake sale, Tiana was bustling about, serving customers with a warm smile, though exhaustion tugged at her spirit. Amid the crowd, a familiar face emerged, Mrs. Celia, her mother. This time, she was accompanied by an elderly woman with kind, gentle eyes. The elderly woman approached and offered a soft smile. "You must be Tiana. I'm your grandmother." Tiana's heart tightened. She had not expected her grandmother to show up, especially during one of the most challenging moments of her life. Mrs. Celia stepped forward, her expression filled with worry. "Tiana, I know you don't want to see me, but I came today to help. This is the money your grandmother and I have saved, to help you keep the bakery." Tiana froze, unable to process the moment. For the first time in years, her mother's eyes reflected genuine sincerity. Yet doubt lingered in Tiana's mind. "I don't need your pity. Tiana replied, her voice trembling. If you wanted to help, why didn't you do so when I was thrown out? I was wrong, Tiana, Mrs. Celia admitted, tears streaming down her face. But I don't want my mistakes to ruin anything else. Please, give me a chance to make things right. Her grandmother gently placed a hand on Tiana's shoulder and said, My dear, forgiveness isn't just for others to feel better. Sometimes it's what frees your heart from its burdens. Tiana didn't respond immediately, but deep down, her grandmother's words resonated in her heart. That evening, as she sat in the quiet kitchen, she opened the box containing the bracelet her mother had given her. For the first time, she didn't feel anger while looking at it. The next day, Tiana sought out her mother and grandmother. Her voice was softer than before. I won't forget what happened, but if you truly want to make amends, I'll give you the chance. Mrs. Celia broke into tears and grasped her daughter's hands tightly. Thank you. I promise I won't let you down. With the support of her mother and grandmother, Tiana reorganized the bakery. She not only refined the recipes, but also introduced creative new treats. Gradually, customers began returning, and even some of those who had once criticized her came back to apologize. When Martha returned from the hospital, she greeted Tiana with her gentle smile. I always knew you could do it, Tiana. I'm so proud of you. Tiana hugged her tightly, feeling as though the storm had finally passed. One evening, after the bakery had closed, Tiana's small family gathered around the dining table. Martha, Celia, and her grandmother sat beside her, their eyes glowing with happiness. Looking at them, Tiana spoke with a heart full of gratitude. I once thought I'd never make it through, but thanks to all of you, I've come to understand that love and forgiveness are the most important things in life. Tiana's little bakery had become a symbol of resilience and kindness in the neighborhood. The smell of fresh, warm pastries was not only a source of livelihood, but also a bridge that brought Tiana, Martha, and her family closer together. Yet life always has its challenges, even when everything seems to be going right. One morning, as Tiana was cleaning the counter, a familiar face walked into the bakery. It was Mr. Esteban, a man notorious in the neighborhood for his domineering attitude and condescending demeanor. He looked her up and down with a smirk. So, you're still standing. I heard your family came back. It's surprising that someone like you could be forgiven. His words were sharp, cutting through Tiana's heart and rekindling old wounds. But instead of shrinking back in silence as she once would have, Tiana took a deep breath, stood tall, and replied, Mr. Esteban, I don't need your approval to live my life. I've learned to stand firm, and I won't let anyone diminish me again. From a distance, Martha watched Tiana with pride in her eyes. Her granddaughter had truly grown into a strong, confident woman. One evening, Celia and her grandmother arrived at the bakery with unexpected news. The family's old home was at risk of being sold off due to unpaid bank loans. Celia's eyes brimmed with tears as her voice faltered. I don't want to lose the place that was once our home, Tiana, but I also don't want to burden you with this. Tiana stood silently, her emotions conflicted. She had forgiven her mother, but helping her family now would mean taking on an even greater responsibility. That night, she confided in Martha. Grandma, I'm not sure I can handle anymore. I'm afraid that if I help my mom, I'll lose everything I've worked so hard for. Martha smiled warmly, her eyes full of understanding. Tiana, you've learned to rise from nothing. You're much stronger than you realize. But remember this, taking on more doesn't always mean losing. Sometimes, it's how we grow. Martha's words helped Tiana think more clearly. A week later, Tiana decided to use all her savings to help her mother keep their old house. She stood by the counter, looking at the money in her hands, and whispered to herself, Money can be earned again, but family is irreplaceable. I don't want to see Mom lose the last thing she still holds dear. When Tiana handed the money to her mother, Celia burst into tears. You've forgiven me, but I never thought you would do something like this. Thank you, Tiana. I owe you everything. At a time when the bakery needed a major change to attract customers, Tiana came up with a new idea. She decided to organize free baking classes for the children in the neighborhood. The same children who once mocked her were now eager to learn how to knead dough, bake, and enjoy their creations. On the first day, the small bakery's kitchen was filled with laughter. A boy who had previously teased her stood nearby, looking at her sheepishly. "Miss Tiana, this cake is amazing. I want to learn how to make more." Tiana's eyes lit up. She smiled and placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. "Of course, I'll show you how to make it even better." Tiana realized that forgiveness wasn't just for her mother. It was also a way to heal the wounds inflicted by the entire community. One day, Mr. Miguel came to the bakery with a special guest, a wealthy businessman. Miguel introduced Tiana. "This is the young woman I greatly admire. I think you should hear her story." Tiana was nervous but recounted her journey, from being cast aside to rebuilding her life. The guest smiled. "I've faced similar struggles. Your story is incredibly inspiring. I'd like to invest in expanding your bakery." Tiana was stunned and glanced at Martha, who gave her an encouraging smile. After months of renovations, the small bakery transformed into more than just a shop. It became a hub with a baking class area, a cozy dining space, and a corner showcasing inspiring stories. On the grand opening day, Tiana, Martha, and her entire family stood together, welcoming the first guests. Celia, standing beside Tiana, held her hand tightly. "I'm so proud of you, Tiana. You've accomplished things I never even dared to dream of." Tiana looked around, her heart brimming with pride and happiness. Tiana's new bakery was no longer just a place for business. It had become a symbol of resilience and transformation. Every day, customers came not only to enjoy the delicious pastries, but also to experience a story of hope. However, there was still one thing Tiana hadn't fully done: confront her past and close the chapter on old wounds. One morning, as Tiana was cleaning the counter, Martha walked in holding a letter in her hand. "Tiana, you might want to read this." Tiana took the letter, her eyes scanning the words. It was a letter from her father, written before he passed away. "Tiana, if you're reading this letter, it means I no longer have the chance to apologize to you in person. I know I was wrong, and I let my foolish pride blind me. Every day I prayed that you would find happiness and that you might forgive me. Even though I don't deserve it, I still hope." Tears streamed down Tiana's cheeks. She had thought she no longer felt anything for the father who had abandoned her, but the letter pierced her heart. Martha stepped beside her, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, my dear, but learning to let go so you can find peace within yourself." To celebrate the success of the bakery, Tiana organized a gathering with her old neighbors, including those who had once criticized her. She wanted to show everyone that despite everything, she had grown and persevered. As she stood to speak, her voice wavered, but carried a tone of unwavering resolve. "I used to think I didn't deserve anything good, but today, I realize that my worth isn't defined by your words, but by how I rose above everything." Her words brought the room to silence. An elderly neighbor stepped forward, her voice choked with emotion. "Young lady, I was wrong. I shouldn't have judged without understanding. Please forgive me." Tiana smiled warmly and replied gently, "There's no need to apologize. We all learn from our mistakes, don't we?" After the gathering, Celia and her grandmother stayed behind, sitting with Tiana in the cozy kitchen of the bakery. "Tiana," Celia began, her voice trembling. "I used to think that preserving the family's honor was the most important thing, but I didn't realize that you are the greatest honor of my life. I'm so proud of you." Tiana looked at her mother, tears streaming down her cheeks. But this time, they weren't tears of sorrow. They were tears of release. "I was angry at you for so long, and I thought I could never forgive. But I've learned that if I don't let go, the past will keep haunting me. "Mom, let's start over. Not for the past, but for the future." Mother and daughter embraced tightly, a hug that melted away years of distance and regret. One day, Tiana received an invitation from a non-profit organization to share her story at a seminar on resilience and forgiveness. Standing on stage, her eyes scanned the audience, and her voice rang clear and full of emotion. "I once thought I had no future, that the world had turned its back on me. But thanks to the kindness of a stranger, I learned how to stand again. And through forgiveness, I found my family once more. Believe me, no matter how dark it gets, there is always light waiting at the end of the tunnel." On the 3rd anniversary of the bakery's opening, Tiana hosted a small celebration. She, Martha, her mother, grandmother, and even Miguel gathered together, sharing stories and laughter. Tiana held Martha's hand, her eyes brimming with tears. "Grandma, without you, I wouldn't be here today. I owe you my life." Martha smiled, her voice tender yet strong. "You don't owe me anything. Seeing you live a happy life is all the reward I need." Standing in front of the bakery, Tiana watched the crimson sunset stretch across the sky. In her hands was a small sign that read, "Where hope begins." She smiled, her heart filled with peace. Her journey was complete. Not only had she found forgiveness and familial love, but she had also reaffirmed her own worth. The story concludes with a powerful message. No matter how challenging life may be, with faith, forgiveness, and love, any wound can be healed. Those who follow Tiana's journey will feel its warmth and strength, carrying a precious lesson for their own lives. As the doors of the bakery closed behind her, a new chapter in Tiana's life began. The small bakery was not only a means of livelihood for her and her family, but also a symbol of resilience and compassion. Tiana had endured the darkest days, not only to find light for herself, but to spread it to others. Standing in front of the bakery, Tiana looked up at the clear blue sky. In her hands was her grandmother's bracelet, a gift from her mother, symbolizing reconciliation and the power of love. She smiled, feeling a profound sense of peace. Life isn't perfect, but it's the imperfections that make us stronger. I've learned to forgive, not just others, but also myself. And I want to tell you this: no matter what you're facing, there is always a path to hope. Believe in it, as I once did. If this story touched your heart, please help spread the message of forgiveness and the strength of love. Don't forget to hit like, share, and subscribe to follow more heartwarming stories on this channel. Your support will inspire us to bring more meaningful stories every day. Thank you for taking the time to follow this journey. Always remember, no matter how tough things get, there's a light waiting for you at the end of the road.